Welcome, fellow travelers of the dark. Tonight, we journey into a realm where silence is a luxury, and echoes carry more than just sound. We delve into a story not told by campfire whispers, but by the decaying magnetic strips of forgotten analog tapes. This is the truth, or what remains of it, from Oakhaven Asylum. Oakhaven. The name itself is a relic, a forgotten monument to a more brutal, less understood era of mental health care. It stood for decades, a hulking edifice of brick and despair, nestled deep within a forest that seemed to absorb all sound. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones, avoiding its crumbling gates even after its abrupt closure in the winter of 1972. The official reason? Financial insolvency. But those who lived near its shadow knew better. They spoke of the cold that seeped from its walls even in summer, the faint, disembodied cries carried on the wind, and a pervasive, suffocating quiet that seemed to swallow life whole. It was years later, nearly half a century, when a group of urban explorers, those modern-day archaeologists of abandonment, breached its rusted gates. They sought thrills, certainly, but also a glimpse into a history meticulously scrubbed from official records. What they found was more than peeling paint and shattered glass. In a doctor's private office, a room mercifully untouched by the elements, thanks to a miraculous lack of roof damage, they discovered a treasure trove of the macabre. A stack of analog tapes, each carefully labeled with dates and patient numbers. Most of them were mundane clinical records. But one series, distinct from the others, bore only 2 words, Patient 7, and beside them, a single handwritten note. Do not play alone. The explorers, naturally, ignored the warning. They were young, fearless, and armed with a working vintage tape recorder salvaged from a forgotten storage closet. What they heard was not just unsettling. It was a descent into a mind fractured, a doctor obsessed, and an asylum that whispered secrets not meant for human ears. The first tape, dated March 12, 1968, the voice of Dr. Arthur Holloway, clear, professional, yet tinged with a weariness that only constant exposure to suffering can impart. He's addressing patient 7. There's a long pause, then a faint sigh, almost a groan. Patient 7's voice, when it comes, is a dry, raspy whisper, as if unused for a long time. They claimed their name was taken by the others. Dr. Holloway, ever the empiricist, asks about these others. Patient 7's response is a low, guttural murmur, something about whispers in the walls, in the dark, and a desire to be heard. It's dismissed, of course, as auditory hallucinations, a common symptom of severe mental illness. But even then, Dr. Holloway's tone holds a flicker of something beyond clinical detachment, a curiosity, perhaps even a nascent unease. Days turn into weeks. The tapes progress. Each session becomes a battle of wills, a slow erosion of Dr. Holloway's professional composure. Patient 7 never shouts, never rages. Instead, they speak in riddles, in metaphors that twist reality into something grotesque. They describe the asylum itself as a living entity, its walls breathing, its foundations shifting, its pipes gurgling not with water, but with the despair of its inhabitants. They claim the whispers aren't just in their head. They're from the asylum, speaking to them, revealing truths no sane mind could bear. On a tape from April 5th, the background static seems to deepen, to gain a resonant quality, almost like a low hum. Patient 7 states, with chilling certainty, that the asylum isn't built on anything, but around something. Something ancient, buried deep, and now stirring. Dr. Holloway attempts to redirect, to focus on medication, on therapy, on observable reality. But patient 7 merely chuckles, a dry, papery sound, and says, "You can medicate the mind, doctor, but you cannot medicate a haunting." As the weeks bleed into months, a disturbing pattern emerges. Other patients at Oakhaven begin to exhibit similar symptoms to patient 7. They speak of whispers, of feeling watched by unseen entities within the walls. They complain of nightmares that bleed into their waking hours. One patient, a quiet woman who had been catatonic for years, suddenly began screaming in the dead of night, repeating a single phrase over and over. "They know your name. They know your name." She was found the next morning in her cell, scratching at the walls until her fingers bled, whispering, "He told me. Patient 7 told me." Dr. Holloway, initially skeptical, grew increasingly troubled. His voice on the tapes loses its clinical edge, replaced by a growing desperation. He begins to document odd occurrences: flickering lights in the dead of night, doors locking themselves, an inexplicable cold spot in his office that would persist despite the functioning heater. He suspects a psychological contagion, a mass hysteria originating from patient 7, but deep down, a different, more terrifying possibility begins to take root. What if patient 7 wasn't mad? What if they were merely a conduit? One particularly disturbing tape from July 18th captures Dr. Holloway alone in his office late at night. He's talking to himself, reviewing notes. The background noise is not just static, but a multitude of faint, overlapping whispers. He can't make out the words, but the sheer volume of them is overwhelming. He sounds frayed, his voice cracking. He mentions reviewing patient 7's files, finding no prior history, no family, no record of their existence before they were found wandering near the asylum grounds, muttering incoherently about the hungry earth. He talks about a recurring nightmare he's been having, a dream of being buried alive, feeling unseen hands pull him deeper, hearing voices calling his name from the darkness. The asylum staff began to resign in droves. Nurses complained of strange shadows moving in their peripheral vision, of feeling icy breaths on their necks in empty hallways. The orderlies spoke of objects moving on their own, of patient screams echoing from rooms known to be empty. The atmosphere at Oakhaven became one of pervasive terror, a place where sanity was not restored, but slowly, meticulously dismantled. Dr. Holloway, however, remained. Obsessed, perhaps, or trapped. He spent more and more time with patient 7, not as a doctor treating a patient, but as a student trying to understand a terrifying master. The tapes from late August and early September reveal a shocking transformation. Dr. Holloway's voice is no longer weary, but strangely calm, almost serene. He no longer questions patient 7's claims. He corroborates them. He speaks of the entities, of the ancient ones below, of a veil thinning at Oakhaven. Patient 7, on these later tapes, is less a patient and more a prophet, guiding Dr. Holloway through a landscape of unseen horrors. Their whispers become more frequent, more articulate, describing what they see within the walls, within the very fabric of the building. They speak of tunnels beneath the asylum, dug not by men, but by something else, something that hungers for silence, for minds, for names. The last full tape is dated September 28, 1968. It begins with Dr. Holloway's voice, unusually clear, devoid of static. He states almost triumphantly that he understands now. He sees them. He says the whispers have names, and they are calling for him. He talks about patient 7 being the key, the one who opened the door. There's a long silence. Then a distinct, wet schluck sound. A gasp, cut short. And then a cacophony. The remainder of that tape is pure audio chaos. The whispers are no longer indistinct. They are shrieks, guttural growls, and what sounds horrifyingly like laughter. Mixed with this is a frantic scrambling noise, heavy breathing, and then a sickening wet thud, followed by silence. A deep, abyssal silence that makes the earlier static seem like a symphony. The explorers who found these tapes listened to this last recording. They described a chill that permeated their very bones, a dread that clung to them like a shroud. They never found Dr. Holloway's body, nor any trace of patient 7. The asylum was simply empty and silent. But the tapes don't end there. There was one final, unlabeled reel, hastily stuffed behind the others. It's barely audible, almost entirely static. But if you listen closely, if you strain your ears through the hiss and pop, you can hear it. A single, solitary whisper. They know your name. They know your name. They know your name.